Welcome to GESScast. Tune in and listen as we speak to global education experts about the latest trends, challenges, and stories that matter.
Hello and a big welcome to Dr. Steffen Sommer, who's joining us on the GESScast today. Dr. Steffen is an accomplished leader with more than 25 years of experience in senior roles across Europe and the Middle East. And he'll be speaking at the upcoming GESS Leaders in Education Summit in Saudi Arabia on the 6th to 7th of May. So thank you very much for joining me for a chat today. And could you share with our listeners a little bit more about you and your journey into education?
Thank you, Millie. Thank you for having me here. It sounds quite extraordinary. 25 years makes me very old, but I suppose I am. Yes, in fact, in a way, I came into education a bit like the version to the baby in many ways. I started my career in business first, having studied Chinese at university and sinology. Really, that's what the degree is, but also European languages. And my first job was in France. I started working for Peugeot in France way back in the very early 90s, in fact, in 1990. That was a pretty good time. I became the logistics manager for the Eastern European markets, also because I speak a number of Eastern European languages. And really, it was just that time when we visited the Riyadh Peugeot plant, when the headmaster of rugby school at the time sat next to me for dinner. And when the job came up about half a year later, also at rugby school, I thought, well, maybe I should go there. And it was just a thought. And that's how it all started. And the rest is history. So that's my first job was at rugby school. I was a language teacher there for a couple of years. And I became a housemaster. And I did that for about 10 years. After that, I became deputy head of Sutton Valence School, the large boarding school outside London in Kent. And from there, I became the principal of the British School in the Netherlands, then the headmaster of the British School of Paris, then the director general of Champité, Collège Champité, which is a large bilingual school in Switzerland, boarding school in Switzerland. And from there, I left for Doha College to become the principal of Doha College, which then I doubled in size, built a brand new campus. And that's the first new campus that I built there as a British school. Sponsored by the British Embassy. And from there, I came to Misk schools, where the campus was a quarter built when I arrived. And we finished it, I came in 22, and we finished it last summer. And it really is now quite a masterpiece. It is, as the vice chair of COBIS, I know what schools look like around the world. And this is clearly something that's unparalleled. This is the first school I run, which is not a British school. It's a Saudi school, but we're running a British curriculum. We're doing the Cambridge Suite. And we have very many features of an international school, but we're not. We're a Saudi school, very special school. We are the Crown Prince's school. And so we've got very many government ministers' children and high-level royals here. But we're quintessentially open to anyone because we've got a large scholarship program too. So that's just a little bit about my background.
Just a little bit. You've got an incredible resume. Wow. You've just, been to so many places and taught in so many places. And you sound like you speak a lot of languages. How many languages do you speak?
As a result, I speak 8 languages.
Wow.
I don't even count Arabic, which I speak reasonably well, understand it better than I speak it, but I speak it reasonably well. But then my expectations are high of myself because I speak so many languages fluently. Yes. My main language is Russian, followed by German and English, but also French and Spanish, and speak Dutch. And I also speak Ukrainian, Bulgarian, and so I speak Czech, my mother's Czech, a number of Eastern European languages, which was, coming back to what I said at the beginning, one of the main attractions when I started my career at Peugeot, which was the time when the Eastern Bloc opened up after the war had come down, and they were very keen on having somebody who understands Eastern Europe, understands Eastern European languages and that kind of thing. Although my main degree is in Chinese, actually, so which of course is also one of my languages, Mandarin.
That is incredible. That's one of the most difficult languages to learn, isn't it?
Well, the podcast's not about that, but I could do one on that. I disagree. It is one of the easiest languages to learn because from as far as the semiotic is the is the science of signs. As a symbiotic system, it might be, but as a language, as a linguistic system, it is a very easy language to learn. Yes, the characters take a while, and one needs to really understand the history and the philosophy of Chinese, of the language, but also of the of China, in order to fully understand them and have the capacity to learn many thousands of them. But I don't think it is any more complex than other languages. It is certainly, as a system, not anywhere near as difficult as Latin or Russian. Not at all. Or Greek, indeed. It's one of the easier languages. It's got a lot of the things that will have troubled you when you learn foreign language at school are simply not a thing in Chinese. The characters are, but that's really, and the tones, but these are the most complex things about it.
Yeah. And I imagine it would have helped massively, but what have you found with the languages across your career so far? How that's helped you?
Well, it's the most important thing is it helped when I worked in the UK because two things helped. My understanding of business, having started my career in business in France, that's always helped me in the many headships that I've had, because I've always understood the school as an internal system, but also as a business, and what needs doing against the lens of what education ideally needs. The language, because in all my schools, that includes the schools in the UK, we had foreigners, we always had Russians, we had Germans, and that kind of thing. It created an air of trust between me and the parents of those children who were foreign. But of course, when I moved abroad, you can imagine when I arrived in Holland with substantial experience of British schools, HMC schools in the UK, that was quite a hit for someone who comes from that system and speaks Dutch. That was quite unusual, and I perfected Dutch. I mean, I had Dutch before, but I certainly perfected it while I lived there. And my daughter, who was very young at the time when we lived in Holland, she became very, very fluent in it as well. So it's and that's helped because we had, of course, many Dutch children. Although we were the British school, we had many Dutch children there. So that it has always created a good liaison between the host country and the school. It created a lot of confidence with the local authorities, because don't forget, an international school is still a school in that country. So you still have to be part of a system, of the education system, with the Ministry of Education, with the local authorities. Especially the British school in the Netherlands, when I was there, grew substantially while I was there. So therefore, it's there are many people there and many schools belong to it, but it's we all have to make sure that that the confidence of the locals were there. And that's the same in Paris. It's I spoke French when I arrived there, and actually it was, if I remember rightly, when I applied for the British School of Paris, or when I was interviewed there rather, it was one of the criteria. So you had to be a reasonably competent French speaker. I speak it very fluently, and that went down well. And actually, the number of French students that we had in the British school increased massively with me, because that was all about confidence level. Because I always felt, as a business, international schools ought to have a fair contingent of locals, because the beauty of them is they don't go away. While, of course, the transient community, the Brits and other nationalities, they tend to move again because they go back home, while locals stay, and that provides financial and therefore sort of a wider level of stability there. And of course, Switzerland was the same, because Lausanne is in French Switzerland, so it's exactly the same. And indeed, when I went to Lausanne, it was a requirement that I had to speak French and English, because the school was a bilingual school, and that was the only bilingual school I ran. Maybe we should talk about that in one of the questions you have later on, because that had a substantial impact on the way the school had to be run. Because it's bilingual school is not only bilingual school, it's a bicultural school, and that really, you are at the cusp of two languages, two cultures, but also two education systems, and that is the most difficult problem to solve when you are leading a bilingual school. Not anywhere near the language. Most people think, in two languages must be difficult. No, that's the easy bit. The most difficult bit is the cultural and the educational differences between them. And then coming to Doha, I didn't speak any Arabic when I came, but I made it my business to learn it very quickly, so I could write and understand it reasonably quickly, and I've perfected that reasonably well. So the understanding is now very good. Not so much when it comes to home Arabic, because I don't use it, but to official Arabic, the Fawsa, official Arabic in writing and speaking, I understand reasonably well, and I don't have any problems following television or following speeches and that kind of thing. And that's of course helped in Qatar. It's but generally the doesn't really matter which language you speak or which cultures you have experienced, but the understanding that different cultures lead to different thinking modes, different ways of interpreting arguments, different ways of constructing arguments, defending arguments, different ways of reasoning, but also different ways of finding solutions to problems, and all of that enriches, that creates different synaptic paths. And my PhD is in cognitive science, so it's a very important learning part. So it does make things a lot easier, because the experience you've kind of lapped up by osmosis by learning languages and being culturally adept. I think is very important when running international schools. Not to mention the fact that, of course, it helped me in running international schools, the fact that my own life was a bit like that. You see, growing up I've only ever been a foreigner. When I was born and raised in Russia, my dad's German, my mother's Czech, so I was a foreigner there. Although I was born and raised there, but my dad's German, so I was always the German. When we moved to Germany, I was always the Russian, because I was born and raised there.
Yeah.
When I moved to the UK, I was the German or the Russian. I never really belonged to the culture in which I lived, not only throughout my career, but also in my youth.
That's nice. I can't think of the right word really, but yeah, the way you can kind of bring that that known feeling to the other students there as well, because it's something you resonate with then as well.
Yeah, and that's the word, you see, because I resonate with it. It creates automatic bond and trust, so that the children know, oh gosh, he's gone through that.
So trust is key.
He knows what that kind of life looks like. There's constant moving about and transient, and of course in those days, I mean, I'm quite old now, as we discovered with the 25 years experience. In those days there were no international schools, so I had to go to local schools, which of course is another reason why I speak all the languages. It's I had to go to the schools where I were. The concept wasn't really that well known, because it was not really, the time hadn't quite kicked off, whereby people were moving from place to place, and children being taught there, and parents working there. I mean, maybe parents working there, but they wouldn't necessarily in those days have taken their families.
Yeah. So just going back to the bilingual school you worked at, I think you said it was in France. How did you?
No, in Switzerland.
Yeah. How did you find that? The change to the other international schools you worked at, because you said obviously it's not just about being bilingual, it's sort of bicultural.
Yeah.
You'd experienced so many different cultures. Yeah. How did you find that difference?
It was quite significant, because the school ran two streams. The IB stream, the English stream, ran the IB, and the Swiss stream ran the Maturité, which is the Swiss version of the baccalaureate. It's called Maturité. Very complicated, very, very complicated, very high level. The demands on the students is unbelievable. And there was quite a dichotomy there, because the biggest challenge there was the way the parents were. Because literally what the parents expected the school to do, what they saw as good education, was almost the polar opposite of what in a British school you would expect to be seen as, you would expect to see in a top school.
Yeah.
In France, but also in Switzerland, there's the going saying, if it does not hurt, it can't be good when it comes to education. So there is this expectation of students and parents that it really is something that's being done to you, and you just have to go through it and do as well as you can. So the notion of enjoying education, making it part of life, preparing for lifelong education, is very, very new in the French education landscape. It does exist now, but of course we are talking quite a few years back now. In those days, no. Learning things off by heart was very common. Being rote learning, that was seen as quintessential to what learning actually is. And the capacity of the children to rote learn was phenomenal. I've got to say, absolutely phenomenal. While, of course, in the British system, that's not what we necessarily do. It is part of learning. That is what we do also, but not what we do only. Reasoning, problem solving, project work, coming up with ideas, defending ideas, it was not the thing they did. Essay writing, yes. Philosophizing and writing philosophical essays, that's a very French thing. Philosophy is a very big thing. They do, and they do it quite well. But it's all based on theories and analytic construction of thoughts, and that's a good skill. I don't deny it. It's a good skill. But if too much focus is given on that, it would be at the expense of many things that are really quintessential now. Which is why part of the of what we see in French education now is there's a lot of feedback from business and from universities that the actual skills that are needed now are not there, because they learn a lot. I mean, in the students who did Swiss Maturité, I tell you, the knowledge they had was just absolutely phenomenal. It was just unbelievable. But I always wondered, how well are you actually prepared for using that and making the most of it? And that is a cultural shift. That's cultural thinking. Yet when you are the head of such a school, you can't say, oh, well, you don't really believe in that, because you have parents who are French-speaking Swiss parents, and they believe that is the best thing there is. And you're offering that course as well, who expects that as the learning style and expects that high caliber of output, and actually draconian examinations that actually I don't believe you could easily put British students through. I mean, can you believe we had oral examinations in physics where you were called in, you're given your topic, you had to had 5 or 10 minutes with a technician, then you had to build an experiment, and they explained what happens. And if, let's say, you forgot to ask for a piece of string and there wasn't there, well, that's all of that was taken off the mark at the end of the day. And you were sitting in front of people you'd never seen before, ever. I mean, it's just how careful we are in British education that that the people, that you've know the environment, and you've seen that kind of paper before. It was very common that these students had never seen an exam paper in their lives before. They saw it for the very first time when they had their exam. So it was very harsh, and so the level was very high indeed. So what I'm saying is, one had to square that. I couldn't just say, oh, we won't do that because we do believe this is better. No, because there are many parents who came to the school for that reason and not for the other. So there's a bigger complication running a bilingual school than just the language, culture, and therefore the understanding of the students, of what they need to get and how they should go about it, and the understanding of the parents, because you need their support when it comes to running a school. And you have this complete polar opposite there, where in one half of the school this is good, in the other half the other is good. So it's an interesting constellation.
Yeah, and that depicts so well some of the differences, even just across Europe, the schools or international schools you've worked at. Have you found many key differences between European schools and in the Middle Eastern region?
Yeah. My schools have always been very innovative. All the schools that I was the head of for ever long became really top players in their regions, top players in their countries, and really high achieving. That's a thing that I can talk about a bit later, because I'm a very firm believer in learning for high performance, which now is actually a thing for high performance learning. I was very active in the Gifted and Talented Academy when it first came into being under Professor Deborah Eyre, which then evolved further into high performance learning. So I've always spent a lot of my time, especially since I'm a cognitive scientist, on making sure the best is being done for the high achievers, as well as those who find life a bit more difficult while learning. Because I always felt in the UK, and I agreed with Deborah Eyre at the time, that not enough was being done to make sure that those who can actually easily go beyond what the curriculum requires. And I don't think enough time was being spent on that. But in the schools that I ran, were always private schools, of course, always fee-paying schools, I always made sure there's enough of a diet there. And there were different schemes and different ways of doing it, because high-performance learning as a thing didn't exist in those days. So I came up with it myself. And I'd like to think that it also fed into what then later on became high-performance learning, because Deborah Eyre and I have been working together literally since the year 2000, when the Gifted and Talented Academy came into being. And I've been following her research and actually putting into practice her research literally from 2000 until the present day, and had much success with it. Yeah, and innovation is part of that. That was, for instance, innovation. I've always made sure innovation you can have in all schools, as long as you make sure that you enable people, because innovation can't just come from the head, it needs to come from everyone, but they need to be enabled to do so. That doesn't mean that everybody who's enabled can be innovative, but many who are can be. And you need to enable academic educational discourse so they can actually talk to each other. They have a forum, either sort of a teaching and learning forum, or where there's mutual lesson observations, learning walks, all these kind of things, opportunities that you can create in all sorts of guises in the school where people can watch each other and learn from each other and have academic educational discourse. And enabling that is not always easy, because there are schools that have taken over where it was completely uncommon to speak about anything to do with school in the common room. And if you have a new scheme, and if you're innovative and you are allowing innovative discourse, you will find that quite naturally this will develop, and it will take off.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible how much you picked up from all different regions.
You asked also about the difference between here in the Middle East and in Europe. The biggest difference really is that the Middle East is an up and coming area in the world. This is where stuff's happening. You see the most innovative stuff, be it in buildings, in whatever, in education, but also in business, that you don't see elsewhere, certainly not in Europe and the US. Reason is because they are very differently structured politically. They're obviously not democracies. There are monarchies. Most of these countries are absolute monarchies, and that of course allows many more things to happen, because literally only one person or a few people have a say. That has certain advantages there. The development is high, and if the top echelon of the country is convinced that something works well, innovation can take off completely, and there are literally no limits to what's actually possible. And that's something in Europe you can't see. It is more equalized, because obviously it's all about making sure that everybody more or less gets the same. It was possible, and we always were very innovative. But if I look back at the type of things that we've done at Dover College, and certainly here at Misk schools, there is just no comparison. It's just no comparison. I think we are here not only a year or two, we are here 2 decades ahead of where schools are in Europe. And that's not to do that they can't do that. They can do that, but the systems around them just don't allow that so easily, and also the funding doesn't.
Yeah. Well, my next question, it's not necessarily tied to a particular region, but it might do with your answer. So I was going to ask, what are some of the exciting developments and trends that you're seeing across education today? But I gather that, that might vary across regions. So if you might come to mind.
It does. I mean, there's a lot of things that obviously we're all speaking about AI. And of course, we are doing AI the big way here at Misk. And we can talk about that if that's what you want. I would quite like to move beyond that, because I think we are now, just to put that out there, I'm a firm believer in AI. I have never thought it would make any sense to try and stop the wheel of history. I remember in Paris, we were the first school that introduced iPads for all students. Parents in primary were crying blue murder. How that's possible, the children will not be able to handwrite. And they were shocked when I said to them, but please don't forget that your children have to function in the 21st century. They will not need to handwrite, because there will be a time where everything will be typed, and they'll just handwrite for show, or because they want to make a present for a friend. And I said there might even be a time when they only speak into a device and they won't write anything anymore. But they should be able to read, but they won't need to write, because a machine will write it for them, and that could already be seen there. And that was quite unbelievable at that time when I said it. Parents were not for it, but we still introduced it to everyone, and they could then understand how much the device was an extension of memory, an extension of capability, and therefore fed back to the students and made them open up a world for them that previously, that hitherto or up to that point, they hadn't been able to see. And that's the same with AI. I mean, when ChatGPT came out, I had a few colleagues said, "Oh well, we won't allow this, we won't allow this," and I then facetiously said, "And how are you going to stop it? How are you going to stop it? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Yes, you could take their mobile phones away, and you could do all of that. That's true. I've never really, it's again a big difference between me and what is generally believed in the French system. I never believe in sort of these big sanctions, because I believe in the power of education. Yes, there have to be sanctions to a degree, but if that's the first thing, you do that and I do that, this tit for tat, it's that never really works out. One needs to be a bit more clever about that and have a more long-term solution. ChatGPT, we use it here. A lot of my staff use it. I don't mind it, because they're generally, many of my staff are non-native English speakers, and their English has improved dramatically with ChatGPT, because yes, it is automatically generated, that's true. But with it, of course, they learn constructions, they learn idioms that actually they wouldn't previously ever have used. But now the machines throw them up on a regular basis. They see them over and over and over again. And that's, but of course, there's a learning curve with it, as it is in the 21st century. It's I have a view of knowledge, but it's of course much more ephemeral these days. And the children, of course, have all the knowledge in their pockets, so they can just look it up. So there's an argument to be had of how much teaching time should actually be spent teaching knowledge. We need to teach knowledge, that's true, that they need to have for their curriculum. But in the main focus of teaching that knowledge is to be the vehicle for the skills that come with it. What do I do with that knowledge? And the deep understanding that what I'm learning at the moment is most likely to be wrong tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And that's another thing that in the past children didn't find all that easy to understand. They were clinging to this. Oh, I've learned this, so this must be correct. And that's new, and that's really that's part of what we need to teach nowadays. So it's I think AI, we need to live with AI. And here at Misk, and that's really how I started this conversation, we are not just using AI, we're doing our own AI. And what we're currently doing, we're just making sure the students for the next academic year can use modules of AI to therefore build their own AI, so that they can enhance their own learning in their own ways by building modules of AI, so that it can help them, so that in a class of 10 or 15 or however you have in the class, they could be working on the same subject in maths and physics or in Arabic or English or whatever it is. And actually they're all on slightly a different thing by using AI in different variations. And AI can now produce in different little modules. You can stick them together different ways. It's a bit like building a computer together. Stick this together, and that's how you can make a module of AI work in different ways. Putting the algorithms together. And that's what we're doing at the moment. And I'm very keen on the students learning how all of this works, because that is just as important as the ability to use it. It's a bit like computers. All my schools became very, very prominent IT places. I've talked about the iPads also, with having laptops and all of that kind of thing. I've always been a protagonist in all of that. And yet I'm not the most prolific techie. I see it a bit like a car. I need to be able to drive it, and don't really mind which car it is. And the same with the computer. It just needs to be able to do the things that I needed to do. And as long as I know which keys to press, that's fine. And not really too interested in what's happening behind. However, as part of education, the students should be given the opportunity to understand how this works and how they can manipulate it, because there will be a time AI will do a lot of the mundane tasks that we do, but we still need to get into a space where even the lowest level jobs do require high level thinking skills in order to be doing the kind of things that we need to do and think ahead, so that all the mundane tasks can be done by AI. And as we now know, AI doesn't just do mundane tasks, it does all sorts of complicated things as well, including writing essays that actually read quite natural.
Yeah. I think that's the incredible thing that I'm learning more and more just with my own work and personal life, is the capabilities of it. I think it's very easy when it was sort of first coming out, especially stuff like ChatGPT and just everything surrounding AI, and people are like, oh my God, it's going to take over jobs and all of this. And it's like, we actually need to know how to use it. And that's a skill to learn how to use ChatGPT to create what you're asking for. You need to have the right input and, know the details you're putting in and the right way to ask it to get the end result that you want, really.
And
it's not as simple as just, it creates it all for you.
Therefore,
you have to give input.
Therefore, ideally, you want to understand how the algorithm works, so that you can actually input the right thing in order to have the right output at the end of the day.
Yeah. So it's it's incredible just how much you can do. Like, I'm learning every day. Like, I didn't even know you could learn X, Y, and Z with it. But it's a skill, and there's so much more to find out about how to use it to its full capabilities.
I agree. I agree. It's just teaching and with it learning has, well, not everywhere, I hasten to add, but has changed significantly. And I do honestly believe that teaching and learning needs to always move with time. Because if we look at the ultimate raison d'etre of schools is to prepare the next generation of the population for the challenges that lie ahead of that generation at the time they're leaving, not at some other time in the past. And that's the mistake many schools have done. They're still teaching in a way, although different content, but they're still teaching in a way that was fit for the Industrial Revolution, which is now a long time ago. And actually almost nothing of what was highly relevant then is actually of any value now.
Yeah. So in addition to AI, is there any strategies that you guys are using at Misk, or you've used in the previous schools you've been at, to help foster and continue innovative education for children?
Yes. Well, yes, of course. At the moment, as I've just said, it is AI, but we do other things as well. Don't forget, we've just had, but we've had the pandemic a few years ago, and the one thing that is being talked about. In fact, I don't think you can afford to publish or write anything about education not mentioning well-being, because it would almost be seen as, not fit for purpose. And I agree, because well-being, of course, especially younger students who in the 2 years of the pandemic were, in grade 2 or year 2 or year 1, and missed out on their phonics, missed out on their classmates, just missed out on the social context, and which all part of inquiry and growing up. That's detrimental, and that's very difficult to catch up on, because once that's been lost at that time when it should have been had, it's then very difficult to do that later on when other learning will have taken place and superseded it. And all the schools that I've worked at, and I was at the time of the pandemic, I was in Doha, it was all about well-being. It was well-being committees and well-being for staff, well-being for students, and making sure there are well-being events, and that people speak more openly about their well-being counselors. And the more I research that and look around what's being done on well-being, it's all about talking about well-being and committees and ideas and what else can we do and that kind of thing. But what I don't seem to see is proactive things that involve the students to work on their well-being without necessarily talking about it, just making sure that it is. That, for instance, the environments in which we learn, in which the students learn and the staff teach, are absolutely essential for the learning outcomes that we have. We know from research that the environment in which I learn has an impact on my powers of retention, of knowledge, of anything that I learn there. Many things, if you think back to your own schooling, you will remember the odd occasion of snippets that you remember of stuff. You might not even remember what the classroom looked like, but a particular thing that you did, either an outing or in a particular environment. So therefore, looking at the environment in which the children work and make that a project for the children, that they can actually do learning with it. For instance, how many plants are in the room? What kind of natural environment are we trying to create for the students to enhance their learning? All of that's been very well researched and has been very well written about. And what are we doing about this? You don't have to be a rich school. You could be a poor school, and you could afford that and do something about it. And other well-being activities, including healthy eating, including doing sport or leading a balanced life of healthy eating, being active, learning and working in the right environment, which makes us part of a bigger thing, which involves other living organisms like plants. For instance, one could argue that more or less we are guests on Earth because the bulk of the living population on Earth are plants, and we are just mixed in with them. And yet we've spent, ever since since man arrived on Earth, we spent the bulk of our time trying to create space and destroy pieces of those plants and take their living spaces away. So it's all that, and yet it is essential for our well-being that we have them around us, and the understanding of what they do to us, and how we benefit from them, and how that affects well-being in the meaning of being well is sometimes completely underestimated. But there are other things as well. So we're just developing that here as well. But we are also looking at other things. For instance, we've got a very large e-gaming suite here in the school, which itself is a very big thing. And to be honest, I was very concerned about it to begin with, because I thought, well, I don't really want all of our students to spend too much time e-gaming. Until I came up with the idea, and I thought, well, actually, it's quite important that we move with time. And I think the days are gone where we can not only tell students what they need to learn, but also tell them how they've got to learn it. So I think in order to keep motivating children in the 21st century, of course, motivating them has become more difficult, because their access to social media, their access to media per se, and to what is possible is now so vast that actually surprising them is almost not possible, because they will have seen it all or heard of it in one way or other, maybe even earlier than we have. So I think the crux there is that we learn to teach students in the way they want to learn. And therefore look at what do they like doing and see what can we teach them while they're doing that, what they like doing. And that would be a great motivator. So I'm working with companies here at the moment who are in sort of the e-gaming world and who can accommodate all the stuff and can kit out my suite here. But I'm very picky, because I'm telling them that I'm only using a company that would be prepared to look at possibilities of teaching maths with a joystick, or teaching history with a joystick. And to be honest, I've worked out a few schemes with a few companies here, and that is possible. And they were quite intrigued with the kind of things that and my team here were thinking of, that we could see working, although we don't quite know how to do it. But these companies are specialists, so they know how to do this kind of thing technically, and that they've gone away to think about. So that's now something that's very innovative, because that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. But we are currently thinking of that, to make sure that children more and more can learn in the way they want to learn, by using activities that they like doing, which at the moment, especially in Saudi, is e-gaming, but it could be something else tomorrow. So I think we just need to be a bit more open-minded, rather than being dogged and saying, well, we've always learned it this way, and this is the way you're going to learn it. Because it's a bit like, the principle of the Catholic Church of learning things off by heart. We've kind of moved away from that in the UK a long time ago, because we knew, yes, while it's important to learn certain things off by heart, but actually it can't be the only way of learning. We learned that many years ago, and I think we need to carry on in that divergent way of thinking and say, well, actually, let's teach the children the way they want to learn, rather than keep telling them how to do it. So that's the latest thing that we're doing here as well.
That's amazing to hear a school that is so responsive to the children, what they like. I mean, I just grew up at school in the UK, which was a great school, but it just sounds like such a different way of learning, and it's really interesting seeing you guys fit it with what the children enjoy doing as well, because I imagine that's much more motivating.
It is.
Yeah.
The reason why we came up with it is because of the dilemma of motivating children. It is a lot more difficult nowadays, because motivation comes with curiosity, exciting, just enticing students by hitting their curious gene. And that's more difficult nowadays, because they already know so much. They explore. We are, as human beings, it's part of our genome to explore. And now we've got mobile phones. We can actually spend all day, every day, exploring stuff, because there's always new stuff being fed to us. So that's great. So therefore, motivating people to do things that we want them to do is a difficult thing.
Yeah. Well, my next question is more specifically for you, because obviously you're working on exploring different ways to motivate the children. But what is it that motivates you as your role as Director General at Misk Schools, and just your passion within education in general?
Yeah, well, we've hit it, but we've hit on a number of the points already. What has kept me going for all those years and really made my job incredibly enjoyable every day, and I do my job with great enthusiasm and great positivity. I'm a very positive thinker. In fact, I get irritated over things if they don't work, but I can't remember one day when I just have a bad mood or I'm just not thinking positively. However difficult the task or the challenge might be, I always look at it as, of course, we'll get there. I do believe in self-fulfilling prophecy. So, if you have a strong belief that we'll get there and you get your team together, you might have made a mistake on the way, but generally you'll get there in one way or other. So I've never really allowed myself to do any negative thinking, and sometimes it pops into mind, oh gosh, what happens if that happens? But, at the end of the day, it doesn't really get you any further. It just gets you into a bad mood. So I try and stay positive, and I'm very motivated by positive people. What motivates me most is what we achieve here, and what here, but also in the other schools that I led before, the ambition of the students, and that they are so excited over every single school I led, and I can say that proudly, hand on my heart. Every day, children generally came in with a big smile on their face, looking forward to the day. And that's a great achievement. That motivates me, because nothing is more important than happiness of the children in school. Now, while I don't quite agree with Sir Anthony Seldon, let's teach happiness, because I think there's a much bigger thing. Happiness, and I say that to my staff here quite openly, of course, also concerns quite a few issues in the private life. All sorts of things can happen in your private life that make you distinctly unhappy, that in a school you can do little about. It's the way it is. You can support it. So I have always focused on spotting, and my whole well-being team are out on that, watching out for that, to watching for instances of unhappiness. Because if you're watching for unhappiness, you can do something about it. But I don't think you can actually proactively teach happiness, because we define happiness, all of us define our happiness differently for what we want out of life. So all of these happiness, and that's motivated me, because I do honestly believe when children smile and are happy to come to school, enjoy being with their friends, that is the right motivation level. Then whatever else you do in motivation is most likely to be successful. If they already start thinking negatively, say if they're being bullied, I mean, don't get me wrong, we have bullying in all schools, but if there are no effective policies, no effective way of handling all of this, and that will then show both in the parents and of course in the students. And we take these things very seriously, and as they do in most schools. But I think these instances, happy schools can be created by being very proactive in watching out for instances of unhappiness in staff as well, actually. You can't always guarantee that all your decisions are well received and are cracking decisions and everybody is happy-go-lucky. It isn't always like that. But the downsides of a decision that, as a leader, of course, we already know beforehand how that would be seen, need to be mitigated. What can we do to make the blow as soft as it can possibly be, if we know this is just the decision we have to make at this time for all sorts of external or internal reasons? Yeah.
Well, that's so interesting to hear. Well, we'll be hearing more from you. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's just it's an interesting question, this motivator, because thinking back now that you're asking the question, I couldn't, in all those 25 years, I hate saying it so often, I cannot remember a single day when I thought this was a bad day. Or, of course, we have the odd day when you feel, after the holidays, we're starting again. And so you have to get the whole wheel, the whole machine going again. Yes, there's a bit of trepidation, but that's not bad news. That's not sort of, we don't like going or doing what we're doing. I cannot remember a single day that I didn't enjoy, enjoy what I was doing, or felt some sort of pride over what's been achieved. However great that was, sometimes very great, sometimes we thought, well, out of a potentially very bad situation, we made the best. Although it's not great, but it's the best out of a bad situation. So, as long as that, I think that's all we can do. It's as George Bernard Shaw said, for us, it's only the trying, and so as long as we keep trying, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, that is amazing that you've, felt that over, your whole career so far. You've never had a bad day. So
yeah, it
shows you're definitely in the right role as well.
Well, it's also, don't forget, I take also my role very seriously, because in teaching we are in a role modeling function. Don't forget, it's been the same everywhere, but here particularly, I run the Crown Prince School. It's not like I'm somebody very very important, but very well known in this huge city here. So when I do my private shopping on a Saturday, I wouldn't go anywhere in shorts and flip-flops. It's the way it is, because I am still a role model. There's a certain expectation of what I look like, even when I'm doing my private shopping. and
Yeah.
certain things are just, it's that kind of thing. So it
Yeah.
also comes with that. There's this deep sense of responsibility and care that I have, that I don't really mind. Maybe initially I thought, well, does it affect, it goes back to when I was a housemaster, does it affect our private lives? We always have to be kind of on show, as it was, like on stage. But you just get
Yeah.
used to it, and it's just one of those things. But I think for the future of the children, and don't forget, cognitively, young children particularly have only one way of learning, and that's copying. So you can
Yeah.
actually do an enormous amount of damage by setting an example that ideally you don't want copying. That's
Yeah.
different in older children. So when by the time they are 10 or 12, the age of reasoning sets in, and then they don't learn anything by copying. They only learn by reasoning. So they need to literally, at that stage, understanding and learning becomes the same thing. So they need to have understood in order to have learned. While they can learn things off by heart, it doesn't mean they have understood. But cognitively, we all know that if they haven't understood, they will not remember. It depends on your capacity of memory. Some have a good, some have a bad memory. But if your memory is not very good, you are guaranteed to forget it within a couple of days. Well, if you've understood it, that is a different thing. For little children, that's different, because obviously the age of reasoning hasn't set in. That's why we call them sponges, because literally they are.
Yeah.
They copy. That's what they do. That's why our kids, they have the same accent as we have. They speak like us. They gesticulate like us, because that's what they do. They copy all day. So and that's great. And bearing that in mind, I think in schools, our moral compass and the role modeling compass has to be exceptionally sensitive. So we just have to make sure we are. It's a bit like, yes, we have to be aware that in a way in a school we are on stage all the time, because we're being watched by children who only have one way of learning when they're little, and that's copying, and that's what they'll do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to speak to you about the upcoming GESS Leaders in Education Summit in Saudi on the 6th, 7th of May, which you'll be speaking at, which a lot of people are very excited about. Would you be able to give us a little sneak peek of what you'll be talking about at the summit?
Yes, of course. I mean, the upcoming GESS conference is about successful leadership in a changing world, and there couldn't be a more befitting title in many ways. We do leadership, we teach leadership here, and that's one of the things I'm going to proactively, and actually quite differently in what schools normally do, because schools normally bolt it on, let's do a leadership course, but we do it within the curriculum, integrated in the curriculum, not only as a subject, but within each subject. But I'll talk about that there. My talk is about critical thinking as a vehicle for high performance, and that will be the first time I'll talk about this. This is another project that we're doing here with Demick, a friend of mine, David Alworth, who is also a professor at Harvard, and we've developed a scheme here which works at the school exceptionally well, and that brings in critical thinking and that looks at it in different ways. That critical thinking is not just something that you can teach as a monolith, there's critical thinking, let's just teach it. That it is a way of a mindset, it's a way of going about life. And therefore, every single academic discipline has kind of different features of what critical thinking looks like. So I'll be talking about that. I will then link that in how that enhances the notion of high performance learning, of teaching towards and learning towards high performing, and what those features are, and what that means for future leaders, what critical thinking means for leaders, and what high performance means for future leaders, and how that ties in with creating not only successful, but what in general terms is called natural leaders. There are people who are classified as natural leaders, and books have been written about them. But I think and that's what I'm talking about, we are very keen on creating natural leaders by looking at what the real natural leaders people who classify as leaders actually do, and how they behave. And we are trying to emulate that through a deconstructed CMI leadership course, weaving that into every single subject, so that children are actually taught about leadership behaviors without necessarily being aware that that's how they're being taught. So it'll be interesting, and I'm sure it'll generate a few discussions. So I'm linking critical thinking to high performance and to high performing natural leadership.
Oh, well, we're really looking forward to it, especially having the little insight to it. So it's been so nice to chat to you today. Is there anything that you'd like to share with our listeners before you go?
Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing many of you at the GESS conference, Successful Leadership in a Changing World, and and maybe you'll link up with me. I'm sure really you'll be able to share maybe my contact details and that kind of thing. If anybody wants to know more, I'm happy to do that. It's the innovation is also about exchanges. It's also about making sure we're sharing, because all our children deserve the best in education. We mustn't forget one thing, that every child only has one go at education, and it's like having one shot in a barrel, and that needs to hit the target, ideally in the middle. We can't just say, oh, let's reload and do it all again. So it's and for that reason, I think it's worthwhile to always share best practice of what we do around the world, so that we can pick and choose the best of that, and do it all ourselves as well in the way that it fits our communities, our student and parent clientele.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Steffen, for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I found it so interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the talks at the summit. So any of you who are listening who are leaders in education and you want to attend the summit, just contact us at marketing@gesseducation.com. But until then, thank you and take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining this week's GESScast. Make sure you visit our website, GESSeducation.com, the essential resource for educators, to subscribe to the podcast and to enjoy the latest education news.